The original Pokémon games are 29 years old, and the majority of the original 151 Pokémon are no longer competitively viable. As time goes on, the power level of new Pokémon increases, and these old favorites struggle to keep up. But some Gen 1 Pokémon have persisted in the competitive scene to this day. Some Pokémon designs are just so fundamentally good that they stand the test of time, no matter what gets thrown at them. Some of these old Pokémon have received buffs as well to keep them relevant. And in one specific instance, a Pokémon from Gen 1 is actually stronger than it's ever been in the new game. Let's take a look at all of the Gen 1 Pokémon that have survived power creep. I'll throw in some honorable mentions too, for Pokémon that still have any sort of viable niche. The Iron Mugulis plush is available for just 3 more days on makeship.com. Check it out while you can. Thank you. When you think of Gen 1 Pokémon that have survived power creep over the years, Clefable is one of the first faces that comes to mind. Clefable is actually better in modern generations than it was back in the day. And usually the opposite is true. Clefable started out as a pretty average, normal type utility Pokémon. Back in Gen 1 it was completely outclassed by Chansey, and in Gens 2 and 3 it was outclassed by Chansey's new evolved form, Blissey. Clefable didn't really have anything to offer back then, but everything changed in Generation 4 when Clefable received perhaps the biggest buff any Gen 1 Pokémon has ever received. The new ability, Magic Guard. Magic Guard is a contender for best ability in Pokémon. This ability is outstanding, and what it does is it grants a complete immunity to indirect damage. This is massive. This means that Clefable is immune to effects like poison, burn, entry hazards, sandstorm damage, just about anything you can think of that is not a direct attack, Clefable is completely immune. Competitive singles is centered around these kinds of indirect damage effects. They're the primary way to actually win games, in fact. So Clefable is an amazing Pokemon in Gen 4 competitive play for this reason. In fact, this is a frustratingly good Pokemon. Despite having very low stats overall, this ability is so good that it completely makes up for it, and Clefable's outstanding utility move pool with options like Stealth Rock, a powerful entry hazard, healing in the form of Soft Boiled, support with options like Wish and Heal Bell, and even Knock Off to remove enemy items. Clefable is thriving, and if this guy wasn't already buffed enough from this simple change, Clefable received another buff when Gen 6 came around and the new Fairy type was introduced. A lot of Pokemon got transformed from their old typing into Fairy type when this new game came out, and Clefable was one of them. And it turned out that becoming a Fairy type was a massive buff. Fairy typing is significantly better than normal typing defensively. You are immune to Dragon, and you have crucial resistances to Dark, Fighting, and Bug, and your only weaknesses are to Steel and Poison, which are very easy to cover with teammates. Fairy typing is incredibly sought after, and Fairy types are very common competitively in general. Clefable becoming a Fairy type was huge, and it made Clefable into the best Pokemon of Gen 6 OU in the eyes of many. It was certainly everywhere back then, and Clefable's competitive viability persisted since then. Not much has changed about Clefable in the modern day, but it is still an OU ranked Pokemon in Gen 9 with those fundamental, excellent qualities of Magic Guard, Fairy typing, and this wonderful utility move pool, maintaining relevance. Clefable may not be as dominant and ubiquitous as it was in some previous generations, but it is still absolutely a relevant presence in the metagame and an excellent Pokemon. Another Pokemon that I'm sure you've already thought about, if you've played any competitive over the years, is Zapdos. Zapdos probably has the best competitive career of any Pokemon in history, with an OU ranking from Generation 1 all the way up until Generation 9. Only one blemish in its entire career, that being in Gen 5 where it dropped down to UU. It is a viable and popular choice in every single other generation, and it has maintained its viability in Gen 9 as well. They just got this guy right from the beginning. This is an electric flying type Pokemon, which is an amazing combination. Zapdos has stats that are not too flashy, but they're solid all around. It's got decent defenses, a solid base 100 speed, high special attack, and this very balanced stat distribution has always allowed Zapdos to be a very versatile Pokemon. This guy can be an offensive threat, leaning into its high special attack. It can be defensive, taking advantage of its great utility move pool and excellent defensive typing. And it can be anything in between. Zapdos has reinvented itself many times over the years. Zapdos has been buffed over the years too. It's had some help. Nothing as earth-shattering as the Clefable buffs, but Zapdos has received significant moveset additions like Defog, U-Turn, and Roost in later games, as well as the new ability Static, which is pretty fantastic. Static has a 30% chance to paralyze any Pokemon who makes contact, which is a powerful way to punish enemy physical threats. In Gen 9 OU, Zapdos has lost some of its good options like Toxic and Defog, but it remains a solid Pokemon with a great combination of offensive and defensive presence. Zapdos crucially matches up well against the all-new Great Tusk, who is the most popular Pokemon in Gen 9. It has the excellent Electric Flying Stab combination, which threatens a lot of things. And with that, as well as Roost and U-Turn for some healing and longevity, Zapdos remains a functional competitive Pokemon and an important part of Gen 9 OU. And in a very fitting turn of events, Moltres also happens to have survived Power Creep alongside its brother Zapdos. Unfortunately, Articuno is nowhere to be seen. Articuno has been quite terrible for multiple games in a row, but Moltres is having a bit of a renaissance in Gen 9. Unlike Zapdos, Moltres has not had as illustrious a career. It was a solid Pokemon in some of the early generations, but as soon as Stealth Rock released in Generation 4, Moltres fell off a cliff, because Moltres is unfortunately ×4 weak to Rock, meaning it is threatened at every turn by Stealth Rock being up. But in Gen 8, Moltres was given another chance when the item Heavy Duty Boots was released, and it could finally patch up that damning weakness to Rock, as Heavy Duty Boots grants a complete immunity to hazards. In Gen 9, this fire flying typing actually feels really good defensively, which hasn't been the case for most games in the series. Moltres has a crucial steel resistance, and with Fire Stab you super effectively threaten King Gambit, the top offensive threat of Gen 9 OU. You're also threatening Goldengo with super effective damage, and that's significant too. Moltres has access to Will-O-Wisp, which is a pretty important option in Gen 9. This is able to completely cripple physical threats, and it's feeling extra nice here because status ailments are a little bit harder to come by in Gen 9. A lot of Pokemon lost Toxic, and the amount of utility guys that can just apply a damage over time effect like this are scarce now. Compared to Zapdos, Moltres is actually a little bit harder to switch in against because of its access to Will-O-Wisp, which not a lot of Pokemon can deal with. Moltres has a similar ability to Zapdos, Flame Body, which has a 30% chance to burn enemy Pokemon making contact, and this is just as good, if not better, than Static. This makes your opponent think twice about clicking certain important moves, like U-Turn to pivot. This makes contact and has a risk of burning your Pokemon, leaving them useless. Great Tusk will think twice about clicking Rapid Spin, as Moltres can easily come in and burn them, leaving your Great Tusk useless. Speaking of Great Tusk, much like Zapdos, you match up pretty well against it, being immune to ground, resistant to fighting, and even neutral to ice. That covers pretty much all of Great Tusk's common coverage. Moltres is my favorite of the legendary bird trio, and I love to see it thriving in Gen 9. It's better in Gen 9 than it has been in a very, very long time. And the best Gen 1 Pokemon of all in Gen 9 competitive is actually Dragonite. Dragonite is one of the best Pokemon in the whole game in Generation 9, which is pretty incredible for a 29-year-old Pokemon, isn't it? I did tease this in the intro, but Dragonite is stronger than it has ever been in Generation 9, with everything working in its favor here. Dragonite is a Pokemon that had a bit of a rough start in competitive. In the early generations, it was not fantastic, especially in Gen 3, where it was outclassed by Salamence. But Dragonite was another Pokemon much like Clefable that got a significant buff from a new ability. In Gen 5, Dragonite received the ability Multiscale, which is a fantastic fit on a Dragon Dance Sweeper. Multiscale means that if your Pokemon is at full HP, they will take halved damage from incoming hits. Halved damage means that you can survive just about any hit if you're at full HP, even if it's super effective. And that gives you a free turn to click Dragon Dance and often win the game just in a single turn of setup. Because Dragonite has an incredibly high attack stat and an outstanding move pool full of different coverage options. One downside to Dragonite was always the fact that it is a bit vulnerable to Stealth Rock though. As a flying type, it is weak to Rock, and switching into a Stealth Rock means you lose 25% of your HP and break that multi-scale effect because you're no longer at full HP. So it was pretty easy to counteract this multi-scale, but that changed in Generation 8 when heavy-duty boots were released. Dragonite benefited from heavy-duty boots significantly as it granted a complete immunity to its biggest shortcoming. And in Gen 9, Dragonite is maybe the best abuser in the entire game of the new terastallization mechanic. Terastallization allows you to change your type into whatever you want, once per game on one Pokemon. You gain stab damage for that type, meaning your moves of that type will have enhanced damage, and you also get to keep the stab damage of the types you were previously. So Dragonite will still deal extra dragon type damage, for example. It just also gets to be a different type defensively, plus gain bonus damage for that type. It's a really powerful mechanic that does a lot, and it's been really controversial actually. A lot of people want terastallization to be banned, but that's a whole other discussion. But Dragonite is amazing at abusing terastallization for two reasons. One, its typing gets changed, meaning it has even more of a safety net against incoming hits. And two, it has the move Extreme Speed, which is one of its best options, a priority move with 80 power. So by becoming a normal type, you gain even more damage on this incredibly powerful option. So Dragonite pretty much always has a free turn to set up. You can't break its multi-scale with Stealth Rock. You can't even hit it with a powerful Ice type move because it will just change into a different type. This Pokemon is incredibly consistent and probably the best boost sweeper in Gen 9 OU right now. I think it's also worth shouting out some Gen 1 Pokemon with different regional forms, Galarian Slowking being the most noteworthy. Now yes, this is a Gen 8 Pokemon, but it's a form of a Gen 1 Pokemon, so I think it's worth talking about. Galarian Slowking is really strong in Gen 9 OU. In fact, it's one of the most popular defensive pivots of the whole generation. Galarian Slowking is a poison psychic type bulky attacker. It has really great stats. High HP, high special defense, and even high special attack. Crucially, this is a defensive Pokemon that can dish out a lot of damage itself, which is important in the modern metagame as things have gotten very fast paced. If you are too passive, you can be taken advantage of, so defensive Pokemon need to be able to pose a bit of a threat themselves. Galarian Slowking also has the incredible ability Regenerator, allowing it to heal very consistently. Regenerator will restore 1/3 of your max HP every single time you switch out, and this is the safest way to heal in the whole game, which gives Galarian Slowking some serious longevity. Galarian Slowking already had a pretty excellent move pool with great status moves and special attacks, but in Gen 9, Galarian Slowking received the new option Chilly Reception, which is amazing. This move will set snow on the field and then switch you out, so it's a pivoting effect that is also anti-weather. You will replace sun or rain with snow, cancelling the synergies that your enemy team might be built around. Plus, maybe setting snow is advantageous for you if you have something like a Kyurem on your team that can benefit from the snow. This was a massive buff to an already great Pokemon. Galarian Weezing has also been seriously rising in popularity recently. Another Gen 1 Pokemon with a new form in Generation 8. Galarian Weezing has a Poison Fairy typing, a very high defense stat, and crucially the ability Neutralizing Gas, which disables all abilities on the field. This is fantastic, and it allows you to disable important enemies like Dragonite with multi-scale, funnily enough, Garganacl and Goldengo, who have status immunity. You'll even disable Regenerator from key targets, preventing their healing temporarily. And Galarian Weezing also has Defog, a much more scarce option in Gen 9. So many things lost Defog. In fact, the only OU ranked Pokemon with Defog in Gen 9 is Corviknight. Hazard removal is scarce, and Galarian Weezing is actually able to click Defog against Goldengo because it disables Good as Gold, meaning Defog will take effect properly. On top of all that useful stuff, Galarian Weezing's typing makes it pretty nice into the metagame as it matches up well against Zamazenta and Iron Valiant and even Ogerpon Wellspring. This Pokemon is officially ranked RU, which is pretty low, but believe me, it has risen significantly in popularity in OU, especially on stall teams, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this guy rise to OU in the future, actually. It's gotten really popular. Guess who else has a small niche in Gen 9 OU? Vileplume. This Pokemon has never been great, but in Gen 9 there's actually a reason to use Vileplume on some Gen 9 OU teams. Vileplume happens to be an excellent switch-in against Ogerpon Wellspring, who is a serious problem in the metagame right now. Vileplume resists water and grass, threatens Ogerpon Wellspring with Stab Sludge Bomb, and even has Strength Sap, one of the best moves in the whole game. It's a fantastic way to nerf attack while healing at the same time. This is a niche choice, it's not popular enough to be OU ranked properly, but if you want a really hard wall to Ogerpon Wellspring that also helps your team out against Toxic Spikes and kind of walls Iron Valiant as well a little bit, Vileplume might be the one for you. This is actually a fairly viable choice. And I want everybody to give a thunderous round of applause to Muck, ladies and gentlemen. The most beloved Pokemon in the history of this franchise, and a Pokemon with a viable niche in Gen 9 OU. This is factual, folks, because Muck is a genuine Pokemon you can consider on stall teams. Because Muck has the ability Sticky Hold, it cannot have its item removed, and this is actually pretty crucial for stall teams. Stall teams are pretty bad against Knockoff, a hard-hitting move that also removes items, and a lot of defensive Pokemon rely heavily on items to stick around, like Heavy Duty Boots and Black Sludge and Leftovers. Muck utilizes the Heavy Duty Boots alongside Sticky Hold to always be immune to hazards. You can't get rid of these boots, so Muck is an incredible switch-in against teams that are hazard stacking as their game plan. Conveniently, Muck has Knockoff itself and is able to remove enemy items very well, and it actually walls stuff that are important to wall. It's pretty nice against Zamazenta. It can do okay against Ogerpon Wellspring. It can do okay against Iron Valiant. A Mono Poison typing is pretty good. It soaks Toxic Spikes for you, which is important too, and it's pretty reliable in a long game at getting rid of enemy items and progressing your game plan. With Rest and Sleep Talk, you also have a form of healing here. I don't think I've seen this recently. There was one team that did really well with this a bit ago, but I'm gonna cling on to the hope that this is still viable in some form. Someone out there is running Muck and winning, I'm sure of it. And finally, I'd like to give a shout out to this team that reached number 6 in the entire world, that featured Charizard. A ZU ranked Pokemon in Gen 9, but someone actually did really well with it in Gen 9 OU. Charizard has a real uphill battle in Gen 9. Its stats are pretty terrible compared to most other things in the game. Fire Flying typing sucks, even though there's boots now. Feels like a waste on Charizard when Moltres is right there. But Charizard does have the ability Solar Power, which, while Sunny Day is active, grants you 1.5x special attack. There is a drawback, you lose 1/8 of your HP per turn, but this makes Charizard a pretty fantastic wall breaker on Sun teams. And a Charizard overheat in the Sun is actually one of the hardest hitting things in the whole game. It helps that Sun teams are really good in Gen 9, as the Paradox Pokemon with Photosynthesis get a Sun boost, so a weather effect that was always living in the shadow of rain for a very long time is better than ever here. So the fact that Sun as an archetype is stronger makes Charizard worth running as a hard wall breaker. Now unfortunately this team, by the player Truthankamon, is no longer legal to use because Roaring Moon has recently been banned. Everything else on the team is fine, but if you want to run this, you're going to have to replace the Roaring Moon, maybe with a Dragonite or something like that, that slots in conveniently. But hitting number 6 in the world with Charizard is noteworthy in my opinion. That's really awesome. And the fact that Pokemon's most iconic starter is still putting up results in the present day is heartwarming to many. I'll link the Smogon thread detailing this team and how it works down below. It's by the player Truthankamon over on the Smogon forums. And that does it for these Gen 1 Pokemon that are still holding on to some form of viability. Quite a few Gen 1 Pokemon are still ranked OU and have stood the test of time. Some have niche value here and there, and I was cheating a bit including the Galarian forms of Gen 1 Pokemon, but I do think they're worth shouting out, and it is fun to see them succeed as well. Do you think that these Pokemon will persist in their viability in Gen 10? Do you think certain Gen 1 Pokemon deserve new buffs, and if so, what should they receive? Let me know down below in the comments, and thank you for watching.